That's a good sign, right?
Yep.
Can we start the meeting?
Yep.
I call this meeting to order. Holly Village Zoning Board of Appeals, October 4th. Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the roll, please.
Rebar. Here. Lagaw.
Here.
Campbell.
Here.
Hutchins.
Here.
Delaney.
Here.
Murphy.
Here.
Machoda.
Here. Sorry, I'm reading that.
Okay, moving on. Approval of the minutes for September 13th, 2021.
I move to approve the minutes as presented.
I second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Approval of the minutes. Okay, moving on to approval of the agenda. Everybody has the agenda in front of them. Is there any
She couldn't hear you, Josh.
I know.
any additions or deletions from to the agenda?
I don't know. I move to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Do we need a voice vote on that? No.
On all I in favor, that's fine.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion approved. Public comment. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes. With the approval of commission speakers, maybe even up to 5 minutes extension. Is there any public comment? I don't hear anybody. Would somebody like to make a motion?
There's someone coming in.
Oh. Would anybody like to speak to the public? Okay, I entertain a motion.
So, we're gonna go right to public hearing. And
Yes.
then you can make a motion to open public hearing.
Yes.
I'm still waiting for public comment. We gotta make a motion for.
I think
no,
I think it's discretion of the chair to move on from public
Okay.
comment.
No public comment. Moving on to a public hearing. I need a motion to go into a public hearing for, the application from Philip Sign and Lighting Incorporated representing Holly Plaza Partners LLC, North Holly Road.
Well, I'll make the motion to move to public hearing case number 2021-004.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion passed. Yes.
If I can introduce the topic.
Yes.
All right. Hi, I'm Caitlin Haben. I'm with Rowe Professional Services Company, your planning consultant. So if you would like to follow along, you do have that checklist in your review material. Something you may have noticed is the variances from our last meeting did slightly change. You may see in the notice that we mentioned a right-of-way setback variance. That at that time when we needed to publish the notice, it wasn't clear if we needed that or not, so we included it. They provided documentation. They do not need that setback variance, so that is why it is not incorporated in this analysis. So the applicant is asking for a variance for the surface display area as well as the maximum height of the sign. So going to the first page, as you can see on the board, this applicant is asking for a fairly large multi-tenant sign. They're proposing to remove their existing multi-tenant sign and replace it with this sign. So as I mentioned, they're looking for an additional 110 square foot display area, and then they're looking for a additional 12 foot in height from our variance requirements. Looking at our set of standards, so as a brief reminder to our ZBA, you have to meet all standards, so 1 through 5 for justification of an approval, as opposed to only one standard can be justified, or has to be specifically named to justify denial. As a ZBA, you can choose what a number or amount is appropriate for a variance. So it isn't the applicant's asking for this amount, you can choose a lesser amount or a greater amount. The number is discretionary towards what this body determines. So the first standard is talking about compliance with the strict letter of the regulation of the sign, setback, location, height, other dimensional provisions is otherwise rendered compliance and regulatory is unnecessary, burdensome, and is not just a mere inconvenience for the standard. So in support, due to the size of the multi-tenant complex, it is difficult to produce a sign with 12 tenant spaces that would be legible for traffic along North Holly Road. In opposition, alternative approaches utilizing wall signage or other sign structures more consistent with the options available in our adopted ordinance could include less desire for more display area. The applicant is choosing the size of each tenant space to be larger than what meets within our requirements. The applicant did indicate as a retail center located for one busy intersection in Holly, they indicated that, again, they want to make sure that there's clear traffic and signage so patrons can maneuver into the complex and where they need to go to resolve any traffic issues, and also make sure that, again, clear signage for their 14 different tenants, and make sure that their patrons can maneuver safely. Number 2 is that the requested variance would be substantial justice by the applicant. We're considering the public benefit, and that we're ensuring that the results of this is not individually hardships that are suffered due to granting of this variance, and consider the rights of others that may be impacted by our variance that's approved. So in support, surrounding properties containing signage regarding signage does not comply with the existing ordinance. The unique situation of this applicant's property challenges some of the construction of a single sign for all tenants, which comply to the ordinance. The subject property does have a large amount of frontage located on North Holly Road. In opposition, the site layout and property conditions were created by a previous landowner regarding how far the building is set back from the road. Alternative sign designs could be further explored, in which property owners along the same corridor have made modification which they're coming into conformancy in that general area. The applicant has indicated they're the largest retail center in in Holly, and the only one that has a large grocery store, a benefit to the awareness of those in our community as well as the Holly Plaza has to offer. Also, tenants in the center would have a needed presence to make sure they have exposure at the street level, so they know to turn. Number 3, granting the requested variance would not increase the hazard of fire or other endangerment to the public safety or create a public nuisance. In support, the sign is appropriately set back from the right-of-way and does not present any nuisance or safety concern. The applicant had something similar to say. Number 4 is there are unique circumstances or condition applicable to the property that does not exist generally throughout the village. In support, the property uses, again, is a large multi-tenant commercial space with many leasable properties. The subject property has a large amount of frontage on North Holly Road, with limited to one size per frontage. The setback for the building is approximately 260 feet, so a greater setback than most of the buildings on that commercial corridor. In opposition, the site design and development decisions are made by the property owner over time. The property itself does not present any unique circumstances or condition compared to other large commercial properties in the village. The applicant indicated they are a 10-acre retail space, so the largest in the village. Post-pandemic, again, they need to make sure that they're catering towards tenants, making sure that they're visible and attracting customers, and then safe maneuverability, better signage results in better and attracts new retail businesses into Holly. If they don't have good visibility, they'll try to find somewhere else. Number 5 is granting the variance will not be contrary to the public purpose and the general intent and purpose of this chapter. And so the purpose of specifically requiring a masonry, essentially no longer a pole sign, but a masonry sign, specifically with landscaping features and aesthetic components, is due to making sure that we have a cohesive character within our community. We also want to make sure we're minimizing sign clutter. So the idea that my neighbor has this type of sign and then I have this type of sign, you're not competing for the same traffic and actually hurting each other from a connectivity standpoint. But due to the large frontage on the property of North Holly, it seems like it wouldn't be causing that sign clutter. The applicant is proposing some improved materials as part of that sign, and I believe is still proposing to do landscaping along the base, even though it's not shown in this mock-up specifically. It's shown in your packet. I think it's page 1 that actually shows that. So with that, in opposition, the proposed sign does not enhance the aesthetic appearance of the village. Rather, it adds another non-conforming sign to North Holly Road. The area of the village currently home to many signs with similar character. It's inconsistent with specifically, this is what is the vision for our community. So you have a lot to ponder. I know the applicant is here tonight, so they will be able to answer any questions. Are there any questions for me?
I have a question.
Go
I
for
wasn't
it.
here last month, which I apologize for. Why do we need 14 spaces? I don't believe there are 14 stores there. If we reduced it by the number of store spaces to the actual number of stores, wouldn't that make the sign smaller?
So that's something the applicant can answer. That's what they put in their application, was that there are 14 tenant spaces. Now, with multi-tenant spaces, you can add a door, you can take out a door. I'm sure it's the creature as itself, I'm sure it depends on what do different people want, especially for tenants. So that is sometimes a maneuvering situation. But as you mentioned, can you pick and choose which tenants are shown? Are they all shown? As you can see that they have their headline ones that are bigger, as opposed to they have several of their smaller vendors or smaller spaces. So they indicate those 4 are their anchor stores, and so those are the major attractions. And so they wanted to have those be larger, and they can speak to that for them on their own behalf. But that's what the applicant's asking, is that I should have 14 spaces for my 14 potential tenants. But that is something they're choosing to do.
My understanding is that the current proposal is for a monument sign. Just looking at it, it seems more like a monument sign rather than a pole sign. Is that correct?
That's correct. This is fully considered a monument sign,
Okay.
because there is no separation. It has it's covered by a full base.
Thank you.
Wasn't the purpose of the pole sign for sight lines when you pull in?
I know that was mentioned at our last meeting, that they wanted to potentially see through the sign, but I would remind you that there was landscaping proposed there as well. And so typically, though, if you're driving up to complexes, my experience has been is that you're really not looking through the sign to see if
True.
there's a truck there, because you're trying to then find tires.
Right.
And tires isn't a good indicator
Right.
of car.
Right.
And so typically with a monument sign, they did include in their packet that location.
Yeah,
So
they moved it, yeah.
yeah, they did move it farther to the south,
Correct.
and then they are keeping some distance between the sidewalk and the right-of-way. The sidewalk jogs, so they do lose a bit more frontage from that standpoint.
So the movement south is still the case, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any further questions?
Good evening. Ed Phillips, Phillips Sign and Lighting, 40920 Executive Drive, Harrison Township. We were at the September 6th meeting. At that time, we brought in a sign that was 21 foot 4 inches tall. It did have space underneath. We did not have the filler between the poles, which have now turned this into a legitimate monument sign. That's something your ordinance does allow. We have dropped the height down to 18 inches, which is a 3 foot 4 inch reduction in height. We have moved it back out of the right-of-way. Your ordinance requires 10 feet behind the right-of-way, and we are clearly that. So we've met every ordinance all the ordinances that we could, while trying to represent 14. There are 14 potential, and like Caitlin said, it depends on how when you have property like this, you can, like Caitlin said, move a door. You can take out a dividing wall, and all of a sudden you have 13 units. But right now we have the potential for 14. If in the event that we had one that did just that, took a door out, or took a door out, added a wall, we could allow that tenant to go across both, because he would in essence have 2 spaces. So we've tried to be as equitable with the division on the sign as we can. If you look at the sign and you realize that Holly Foods, I'm rounding a little bit here, Holly Foods, these are the anchors, the 4 anchors on top. They're approximately 16 and a half feet. And I don't know what the Holly ordinance allows for a standalone building. It's certainly far greater than 16 and a half feet. And again, that's a different environment, I understand. This is a shopping mall. If you look down at those lower tenants, they're only 4 square feet. I mean, that is literally, they're 1 foot high and they're 4 feet wide, 51 inches, I think. So just a tad over 4 feet. So the sign is as conservative as we can be in terms of trying to make something that's legible and makes sense. If we go, let's say we took those tenant signs and moved them down to maybe half the size. A 6-inch by 2 foot. Who in the world's going to read it? So I think it's incumbent upon us to put stuff out there that is legible. People have plenty of time to stop, and people realize what's in that mall. Because that mall is really unique. I was over there again tonight in the rain and looking at it. The way it tucks in, when you pull in that driveway and then you look to the right, it just kind of goes on and on and on back in there. It's those guys have a horrible time advertising. So we think this sign in particular is incredibly important to give not only the shoppers, the patrons, a good, fair shot at knowing what's back there, but the operators of all these stores that have put their life, a lot of times their life savings into these little businesses that try to make it. So I think we've addressed what we were asked to do on the 6th, and this is a fair shot. And we do intend to do some really nice landscaping out there. It's Mr. Sarafa's intent to just turn that thing into a showplace, that whole strip center. And I think this would be a great step forward. If you look at the sign that's out there, I just can't believe that sign has served that property for as long as it's been there. It's amazing. It hasn't served the property, is the truth. So, if I could answer any other questions?
I think my concern, everybody else, is the sight line. You get down there when school lets out, and traffic is bumper to bumper. Pulling out of either one of those driveways is difficult with the little sign. With that bothers me, to be
Okay.
honest.
Caitlin, did we include a site plan
If that's
in their
farther back
packages?
on the road, it really wouldn't be
Do you guys have a site plan?
They moved it
concerned
way
as far as
south.
moving in and out of the
Yeah.
parking, right?
Who's speaking there?
Recognized by the chair.
Joe.
I apologize.
The site plan thing is the total. I was there once again this evening, trying to be totally honest about every response that I give you guys. The site plan thing is totally irrelevant. When you're pulling out, you're on the other side of that island. If you think about that island that's in the drive, so you're already that far away. Now we've taken the sign and we're moving it more south from what's there now. We are going to be much less. The sign that's there now is twice the threat that ours is going to be. We're moving south and we're moving back. We're not as close to the street as that sign. And we've moved away. So, that's a win all the way around. You can see forever.
How far back, excuse me, how
Yes.
far back are they moving this sign further away from the street? That would be west,
answer
I
that.
think.
We are 10 feet back from the right.
So?
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh,
Well,
should I?
east. Yes, it would be east of the road.
They're going farther south
Yeah.
and farther east. So they're getting away from the right of way, and they're giving you more chance of a sight line because they're going farther south.
Okay.
So you got more of a chance to either really give it the gas or put on the brakes, one of the two. Because right now it's kind of tricky coming out of there.
With the existing sign.
Yes.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any more
No.
questions about sight line or distance? Did you have any more questions about that? Do you understand what they had to say?
No.
You all set on that? Okay.
Joe, is any part of this sign gonna be lit?
The sign is lit, absolutely.
And all of it, or part of it, or?
Just the spaces that you see on here in white, this would be an old big background, so Holly Plaza would light up there. If you only see the wood Holly Plaza, really, really classy. These panels down here all do light.
Are they backlit?
Obviously, they are backlit. None of this lights. And by the way, it's all LED lighting, so you shouldn't expect to see any parts of this sign working and not working and all the rest of that stuff. The LEDs have really been great.
Well, LEDs can be quite bright, and I know I don't think there's anything in our ordinances that have anything to do with brightness. And
No, that was gonna be addressed by the planning commission.
good.
Yes.
Movement
Thank you.
and brightness
Thank
because
you.
of the signs
Very
we
good.
already have. And you gotta remember, this is backlit, so you're not getting the full force of the LEDs. It's opaque, not transparent.
Yes,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there is absolutely no movement at all.
good. Yeah, I want stuff in our ordinance that specify these things.
Well, that's where the
Yeah.
planning commission is working on that.
Good,
And it does address lumens and, movement.
thank you.
Yep.
That puts my mind at ease.
I think equally important is the fact that the sign's not out. A typical fluorescent lamp is rated for 12,000 hours. And that, figuring that Michigan, 12 hours is what we figure, short summer days, long winter days. So 12 is what we use in the lighting business. If you figure that, 12,000 hours, that figures out to about 3 years.
Yeah,
And then you have parts of the sign that are dim, parts of the signs that are bright because new lamps have been put in, and it just starts looking terrible.
yes.
This is all LED. These LEDs are rated for 100,000 hours, not 12. It's just a new world. It's amazing. Our service business is going to hell. Did I say that?
I didn't hear that.
Okay. But it's good for the customers, good for the end user.
Any further questions from the board? Any comments from the village?
Mr. Chairperson, I'd like to move that we close the public hearing.
We have a motion on the floor to close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor, say
Do
aye.
it.
Oh,
Aye.
Aye.
oh,
So,
oh, we passed up the owner. Did you have anything to speak about?
gonna add a little bit if that's okay, but
Yeah, go
Sure.
ahead. That's
Sure.
what you're here for,
Sure,
yeah.
I
We'll hold the
apologize.
motion.
I thought you were done.
hold the motion. Got it.
good evening. My name's Anmar. Oh, sorry. Does it go up?
You can hold it in your hand.
It's okay. We'll put it back in there. My name's Anmar Sarafa. I'm one of the owners of Holly Plaza. I own it with my cousin Joe Sarafa, and we've owned multiple centers around the state of Michigan. So I just wanted to make a brief comment, and that is our vision here is not just to get a sign. So when we purchase these centers, they typically get a little bit tired and dated, and our intention is always to try to improve the properties, try to get better landscaping, better lighting, better signage, just to basically freshen up the properties for the townships and the cities that we are in, representing as landlords. The tenants here, they're wonderful people, but they have challenges, not just because of coronavirus, but just because of poor visibility. And if you've ever been in the retail business, you know how important signage and visibility is from the road. So our intention is to try to provide not just better signage for the patrons as well as for the tenants in the plaza, but to be able to attract a better tenant mix to Holly overall. So when you have a nice center, when it's cleaned up, when the facade looks good, when the signage is bright, when the lighting in the parking lot is good and striped and covered and all the fun things that we have to do as a landlord, it's noticed by some of the tenants out there that are looking for space, and not just the local tenants. We're looking for regional or national tenants that would like to take some sort of a opportunity to come into Holly and conduct their business. So just strategically, from a vision standpoint, this is our step one. We'd like to get a better sign for the plaza, but this isn't going to be where our investment ends. We're going to be putting more money into the plaza to freshen it up and hopefully make you proud that we're the owners of the center and, make it a real shining star for you.
Thank
All
you.
right?
Any questions from the board? Hearing none.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Now we have a motion on the floor with a second to go out of the public hearing? All in favor say aye.
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 Nobody opposed, motion carried. Discussion on this from the board.
No, sir, we move to the next public hearing,
Oh.
and then we'll go to general business after that.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Our next piece of business is a public hearing for a variance filed by Frederick Fuller to allow for a 4-foot wrought iron fence in the front of 508 Sherman Street, HI 0134377007. And the case number is case 2021-005.
I move to open public hearing in the case of 2021-005.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. It's yours.
All right. Well, you did a great introduction. So, to remind the Zoning Board of Appeals, they're in front of you today requesting a 1-foot variance for a front yard fence, in which they would allow a total of 4-foot fence. So, as you may be aware, we do allow fences in the front yard. It has to be ornamental in nature, which is what the applicant's proposing. It's a wrought iron fence. It's just a matter of that it is specifically that it was installed and is 1 foot over our specific requirement. So the property is zoned R1B single family residential. In your packet, the applicant did provide some dimensions showing what that total fence was. So you have 49 feet parallel with Sherman Street, and then you have 14 feet that come in along the driveway and towards the house. So it is still within the front yard and doesn't have any other violation issues regarding that fence. The intent of this provision is to ensure that we have a character in our residential area that's welcoming, provides open space view, and isn't a physical barrier that's so obtrusious in the front yard. So as a brief reminder, similar to our first variance, there are 5 standards. We have to meet all 5 to support approval of a variance, while only specifically name 1 to justify a denial. So in support, the looking at practical difficulties, so this is looking at dimensional components associated with the property. This unreasonably prevents the use of the property as permitted and would be considered unnecessarily burdensome and is not being asked merely out of inconvenience. We did not find anything in support. In opposition, the subject property conforms to all other zoning ordinance requirements. Looking at lot width, size, the fence does not impact the single-family use of the property. Number 2, looking at substantial justice. So looking at the variance that is being provided would be well suited for other property owners in the same zoning district. An alternative or lesser variance would not provide enough relief. In support, the applicant is maintaining an ornamental fence, which is still maintaining that same character that's desired in a residential neighborhood setting. In opposition, the applicant is proposing a taller fence than what is otherwise allowed in residential areas. Number 3 talks about public safety and welfare, making sure we uphold that. In support, it does not appear the proposed variance would impact the public safety. The applicant would maintain, again, the general character of that residential area, and it is an open fence. In opposition, it does exceed what our maximum height requirement is. Number 4 is looking at extraordinary circumstances, so specific circumstances or conditions to the property, in which is not a general something you can apply to the other properties or something in the same zoning district or general area. It's very specific to the property, is not self-created. So we did not find anything in support. In opposition, the applicant is asking for this variance so they don't change this existing sign. Number 5 is no safety hazard or nuisance. So again, making sure that we're keeping the public safe and not creating a public nuisance. In support, it doesn't appear the additional fence height would increase the hazard, public safety, or public nuisance. Number 6 is talking about the relationship to the adjoining land uses. So again, we want to make sure that we're having variances that are harmonious with the neighbors, in which we are maintaining our essential character in our neighborhoods. In support, the subject property is zoned the R1B single family, as well as that surrounding area. They're proposing an open fence, and doesn't appear would change the essential character of the area. In opposition, they are proposing this variance because it is taller and in the front yard. That's inconsistent with our vision. The applicant did include in their application that they've lived in the neighborhood for 24 years, and they're looking to upgrade their home, and that was an aesthetic decision that they wanted to do to improve not just their property, but that surrounding character in that area. So the applicant is here tonight. If we do have any questions for them, are there any questions for me?
Just out of curiosity, what was the original rationale of setting such a fence at a maximum 3-foot height?
So it's very customary in zoning ordinances in front yards that you want it to be something that's relatively hip height. So the idea, again, that it's not obtrusive. So even somebody that's like a standard person would be able to clearly be able to look into a yard and not feel like it is a physical barrier. So as opposed to side yards or rear yards, they're allowed to have up to a 6-foot fence because, again, you're looking at that's meant for privacy, that's reasonable to do in a side or rear, but in our front yard, we still want to have a welcoming character, and so that's why we don't allow, and that's typically a standard height that's done throughout the industry.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
I have one. There's a house nearby, the house that we're talking about, that has a tall fence. It
Would you
seems
state
like-
your name?
Oh, I'm Josephine Campbell, 312 LeGrand. No? Oh, anyway, it's nearby, and it has a what seems to be a close to the same height fence, and it's not even see-through. So,
Now that I can't answer.
so I'm wondering if. All right, never mind. I don't understand why one is allowed, one wouldn't be.
So there's certain, I can't speak to the specifics of that property.
I'm not even sure of the height. I'm just saying it's
Sure.
but it's not even. You
So
can't see through it.
sometime-
It seems like it's around the whole property.
Sure. So sometimes, again, it goes back to front yard. I don't know if it's a corner lot because that can make it a little bit more tricky.
Okay.
The other thing is
is.
there could be a variance that is granted at that site.
Okay.
Corner lots are a little bit easier because you have more required frontage that's being
Oh.
taken up, so you have
Alright.
less privacy.
Okay.
The other thing is, depending on when the fence got put in, wrought iron looks good as long as you maintain it for a very long period. And we have some pretty historical
Yeah.
homes.
Yeah, it seems-
And so there could, I don't know for sure, but there could be a certain level of grandfathering. If that was put in before the rule was created, they can continue
I
to
have no
exist to
idea.
a certain point.
Yeah, I don't
So
know.
I'm not the specifics on that site, but that's at least two theories I have for you
Perfect, yeah.
on way that may or may
Okay.
not, and that's something the village can look into.
Would
Just-
the
that was
village,
my
would the
curiosity.
village like to speak on that?
My assumption as well is it'd be existing nonconformity, but without the specifics of an address or a parcel ID, no, I wouldn't want to weigh in on that without having specifics in front of me.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, we did receive a letter from the public that we would like to read on the record for this property.
Yes, go ahead.
It was dated 9/29/2021 regarding property at 508 East Sherman. I reside at 501 East Sherman and have no problem with the fence in question. Frederick Jim Fuller is a great neighbor and a property owner. His house is sited in colors appropriate for the area, and I feel the fence height and height is also appropriate and completes the picture. It is in keeping with similar properties in the village whose owners are restoring to reflect the era. And that was from Martha Van Gorp.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions?
Was there any other public
We did not
comments?
receive any other letters or comments for either properties this evening.
Now's when we can let the,
Now we're gonna ask the public if they wanna speak on that. Yes, sir.
okay. Is there any public comment on this? State your name and address, please.
Evening, folks. I'm Jim Fuller, 508 East Sherman, and my lovely wife here tonight, and some of the property owners. And Mrs. Van Gorp is in the back, the one who wrote the letter so kindly for me. As she stated, and I forgot your name, Christine. Caitlin. That my wife and I have lived here for 24 years. We've loved living here in Holly. We plan on making our next move to the Marble Orchard down by the lake, probably. We're both high school teachers, and so we're able to get a few bucks together and do some improvements on the place. And I believe you've probably seen some of the pictures that we submitted, so you can take a look at them. We had just kind of hoped to start to get this area up. It's such a beautiful town, and we'd like to see, like the business owner here, see maybe this is going to be an attraction for people. Seeing these nice old historic homes, getting redone, some of the plaza and different things. I mean, my wife and I have shopped there for 24 years, and we can tell what's going on the inside. It's looking great. But when we decided on the look of the fence, we'd kind of driven around town in Holly and over to Fenton, and we saw a lot of maybe they were the really old fences too. They were 4 foot, and so that was kind of we decided on to have that reflect in our home. So with that, I guess if there's any other questions for me.
Actually, I do.
Yes.
In your application, you said you were in the house 24 years.
Yep.
And I walk past your house almost every day. It looks very nice, but I know you've just done siding, so obviously you pulled the permit. Why didn't you pull the permit for the fence before the fence?
Great question.
Because the 1 foot to me is a no-brainer. That's easy.
When
But
Mr.
the
Watson
permit is the problem.
left the citation on there, I'll be honest, I didn't investigate. I just assumed an ornamental fence didn't need a permit. So, and we did pull a permit. Guy Jones, who has a signature siding, who did our home, he took care of all that stuff. And I had kind of asked him, he said, I don't think you probably should have a problem with it. And so, little did I know I'd be here tonight. But that's and I believe somewhere in there I wrote, kind of shame on me. I did not, look into it. So, anything else?
Guy Jones does an excellent job on siding, I must say. And he did our house, and very happy with it.
Yeah, when we saw some of the other places around town, my wife and I, 10 years ago, we thought, man, this is the guy we want to have do our place. I mean, the guy's just a machine. Everything he does, every movement, it has purpose, So, yeah. I don't know if he has a microphone in here, but Guy, we're endorsing you. So,
Any other comments or questions? I guess we can go out of public. I entertain a motion to go out of public hearing.
If we could ask the public if there's any more comments?
Oh, any more comments from the public? Oh.
Just really quick, my name is Kim White. I live at 505 East Sherman Street, directly across the street from them. And I can tell you, just being across the street, it looks beautiful. It's not, causing an eyesore or making it difficult for us to look over there. It's a beautiful home. The fence is complimentary. I think we live right next door to the fence, I believe, that you're questioning, and compared to that, it builds up the character of our community, and people stop and they look. So I love the fence. I hope that you guys approve it, because it would be a shame to tear it down for 1 foot.
Thank you. Okay, now I can entertain a motion for, is there any more?
Any more comment?
I read your letter on the record, but if you have any more comment that you'd like to make, you're more than welcome to say.
My name is Martha Van Gorp, and I live at 502 East Sherman. Only one house between Jim and I. And he's lived here for 24 years. I've lived here for 50 years, and I saw the condition of the house before they bought it, and they have made so many improvements. And I just feel that, in keeping with the era of the house, back in the day, I'm sure that there were a lot of 4-foot fences. Of course, they didn't have to worry about cars, they just had to worry about horses. But But still, I just feel that he has made so many improvements, and I would like to see the fence be able to stay because it just does so much to the character of the house.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'll entertain a motion to go out of the public hearing.
So moved.
No, I'll entertain a motion.
That's what I said. So,
No, you have to
Yeah,
actually state it.
I move to move out of public hearing.
Second.
For case,
Oh,
In
second,
case number 2021-005.
is
I
there,
will second.
all in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carried.
Aye.
That's painful.
Now we finally get to go to general business. We have to take action on number one. The application for the variance was filed by Phillips Sign and Lighting, presented by representing Holly Plaza Partners. The request is for a variance to allow for monument sign to exceed the display area, height, and setback from the street right of way allowed by the ordinance. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yeah.
So there are certain aspects of the revised plan that I really appreciate. I appreciate the move south to improve the sight line. I appreciate the changing of the sign from a pole sign to a monument style sign, certainly in conformity with our ordinances. I really appreciate that it's backlit rather than some sort of digital sign. I think that, in my mind, a 100% variance, either with regard to height or the display area, would be very generous. That's what I thought at the previous meeting, and I might have even said as much in the previous meeting, if I recall correctly. But as it is, the request is for a 340% and a 200% variance for square footage and height, respectively. And that seems like a really big ask to me. I don't think that really I don't think that comes anywhere close to meeting us halfway with regard to conformity with our variances. It's really less of asking this board for a small variance and really asking us to dispense with our sign ordinance altogether or alter our sign ordinance altogether. And if that is the case, that's perfectly fine. But it would be more appropriate to come to the council to ask for that change in variance rather than coming up to us to ask for so large an exception to the rule.
Any other comments?
I think it's great. That's all I got. I mean, it's I mean, otherwise then we do what, 14 monument signs going up Saginaw Street? It is a unique property. If you go through our list here, it's different than any place in town except for Midtown. There's already pole signs up there, but this isn't a pole sign anymore. Now it's a monument sign, and he's right. You can't see like 3 of those stores. I lived right across the street from it for a long time. And there was a place, that old pawn shop. You never even knew it was there unless you walk around that corner. So,
Yes.
While I will admit I'm a little uncomfortable by the size, especially with the sign across the street with the large TV, for lack of a nicer way to call it, I think with the pandemic, we have to do what we can to help these businesses stay. I mean, and Fenton Taylor Hardware just closed after like 75 years. Loyalty Tattoo, which most of you probably don't know I do, closed today and are moving to a smaller building. There's too many buildings closing because they can't bring people in, either employees or customers. I think, while I'm not crazy about the size, and I'm not going to lie about that, I think we have to help these businesses, especially with Holly Foods. They have done so much upgrading. And that store used to make me feel dirty to walk into, sorry. But now it is absolutely, it's a nice store, and I don't mind going there and shopping. I don't mind my grandkids going in. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not crazy about the size, but I think we have to help them, to help our community.
I also have, as far as that goes, it is a very unique property, and it has more tenants there than any other mini mall property that we have in Holland that I'm aware of anyway. Most of them are, there's a couple, 3, like where Villages are, there's like 4 or 5, whatever. I think that's an appropriate size.
Absolutely.
I actually think, I know it's going way out of the sign ordinance, but our sign ordinance is, I feel like we probably should, they tried to help, I mean, because they had to get all the smaller tenants the space. So I think they made an honest effort to try.
Nathan?
I'm going to try to make a comment. I've got to agree with Ryan on this. I think that our applicants have made some effort to bring themselves into compliance with the ordinance. I think they could go further. I'm a little dismayed that the size of the sign is as big as it is. I appreciate that it's no longer a monument. I mean, it's no longer a pole sign, but rather a monument. But I still feel that it is too large.
Larry?
No comment.
My comment, Joe Hutchins. Holly Plaza is a unique commercial entity in Holly. It's been set back there before. I've lived here almost 50 years. You gotta remember at one time that was Hamady Brothers. It was Kroger for a short time. It was Freeman's. Then they started building on to stuff. The bank used to be there. One of the banks used to be there. And it sits way back off the road because of the parking lot. It's a unique plaza in Holly for size and tenant numbers. And the applicant, I think, has made strides in moving the sign out of the right of way, back in farther, down farther, backlit it. The size is a little large, but still, it's a large plaza. It has 14 tenants, or capability of 14 tenants. So being unique in that aspect of size of the plaza, the sign has to accompany the size of the plaza, I think. So that is my comment. I think they've made some strides. I'm not a big sign fan, but you gotta take a look at how big a plaza that is. And that's like the one, if you go down Silver Lake Road, they got big signs down there because it's multiple plazas. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So, that's my comment for tonight.
I do have a comment.
Okay.
After thinking about this. This also covers the stores in the back, is that correct?
Yeah.
That face the,
There's no
face
stores
the
in
back.
the back.
Yes, please.
There's one tenant in the back, it's a doctor.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And yes, it will cover that doctor.
Great. I see. And if you have fewer than 14, you would still have these spots on the sign that are blank? Is that correct?
That said, if we have one tenant that takes 2 spaces, sometimes that happens, they expand. We'll take 2 of those panels and make them 1.
Typically, it's a divider bar to be a horizontal layout.
Any further comments from the board? Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the application for case number 2021-004 as stated.
Josh, I would need you to read page 404 on the back, sample motion to.
Oh, sorry.
I would need you to read that entire.
All right. I make the motion to approve the requested variances for a 12 feet sign height and 110 square foot sign display located at 15191 North Holly Road based on the following findings of fact. It complies with standard 1 based on compliance with a strict letter of the regulation applied to sign size and height. And height renders, wait. That reads weird. And height renders compliance with the regulation unnecessarily burdensome. It complies with standard 2 based on granting the variance would give substantial justice to the applicant by considering the public benefits intended to be secured by the signed ordinance and the individual hardships that will be suffered by a failure of the ZBA to grant variance, and by considering the rights of others whose property would be affected by the allowance of the variance. It complies with standard 3 based on granting the requested variance will not increase the hazard of fire or otherwise endanger public safety or create public nuisance. It complies with standard 4 based on unique circumstances or conditions applicable to the property that do not exist generally throughout the village. It complies with standard 5 based on granting the variance will not be contrary to the public purpose and the general intent and purpose of the sign ordinance.
I second that motion.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
McGaw,
Yes.
Hutchins,
Yes.
Delaney,
No.
Murphy,
Yes.
Chota,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Rebar,
No.
Motion passed.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Moving on to our second item. For the fence variance, case number 2021-005, to allow for a 4-foot fence.
You need automatic one.
I'm just being your showgirl, changing the board.
Thank you, Vanna.
At
Vanna.
508 East Sherman. Okay, any discussion?
Now, this iron fence is just in the front yard, is that so? Can you point that out?
Yes, so it's approximate, you do have a sketch that's in your packet that,
Yes.
that the applicant provided, but essentially you're looking at like around here, and then it comes back 14 feet to the house.
I have a comment. So ordinances are there for a reason, right? But the reason for this ordinance, I believe, I'm sure it was in the beginning, is to make sure we don't have a 10-foot stockade fence in someone's yard, right? This is a wrought iron fence and it's a foot, and it looks awesome. I mean, their neighbors don't have a problem with it. Nobody else has a problem with it. No one's gonna notice a foot anyways.
I couldn't have told you it was a foot off.
Yeah, I wouldn't. No one would know.
I would agree with those comments as well. I mean, it's a very small variance being requested, and it looks beautiful. And homeowners have obviously made some significant improvements. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, pretty sure
Oh,
not.
significant improvements to the property, and very consistent with that historic and Victorian style that is, throughout the neighborhood.
Honestly, I think it looks great. Like I said, I walk past your house every day. The siding is beautiful. It's not like it's a solid 4-foot wall, which might have been a problem. To me, the biggest problem is the permit. Because then if it's something that we can't approve, then we look like the bad guy saying you have to take it down. Or actually, we make Jeremy the bad guy tell you have to take it down. That's the problem, is not pulling the permit first. It's not just, there's a reason we pull permits. I'm assuming you pulled one for your siding. So it's kind of the same thing. But I do think it looks nice. It's a vintage look. I really do like it. The permit thing is a problem for me.
And just to piggyback off that, if I may, if it were a larger variance being requested, if this was a significantly larger project that the homeowner just didn't care to pull the permits for, I might be inclined to be more of a stickler about the rules. But all things considered, in this situation, I think that's something that
Well, there are
we
a
can
lot of
let
other
slide.
4-foot fences in the village. So, I mean, it's not, the 4 foot isn't a big deal to me, I don't think.
I would like to comment.
Yes.
I don't have a problem with the height, even though it doesn't meet our specifications. But what irritates me about the fencing ordinance is that it allows a fence to come right up to the sidewalk. I would like to see the ordinance rewritten to allow a 2 or 3 foot, whatever they decide, away from the sidewalk. I just think it would make snow removal easier for everyone involved, and it would look nicer. But I have no problem with the fence that they have there.
Nancy.
That's a planning, whatever.
You're up, Jake.
All right. Just as a planning consultant, your friendly reminder, so we need to make sure that we have some level of rationale for all 5 standards. So making sure that when you're thinking about it, that we think about how we meet potentially 1 and 4, which were the missing categories. So make sure that you include, again, if you want to talk about historical context as a special circumstance specific to the property, making sure that we kind of note that. Again, making sure that we're fulfilling the standards because we want to make sure that we're upholding consistency throughout different administrations. So you can add that. That is not something that we specifically took into context during our analysis, but this is why it comes to a zoning board of appeals, and so it comes to a body to make that decision. So that is captured in our discussion. Just make sure it makes it to the motion.
Everybody understand that?
Yeah, I have one thing. Is that in the historic district?
I couldn't tell you it's by parcel.
Yeah, I know, because I'm not sure if that one is.
I don't have the parcel list in front of me. I know we are currently redistricting.
Yeah, we are.
DC, so
Yeah.
it would align with that new one as well.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
I'm sorry, one more time. You said the historic context
of
that would go with which standard?
So that could easily fit under 4, which is talking about extraordinary circumstances or conditions to the property. So it is considered a historical home in the historical area. The only other standard that you have that wasn't specifically noted in support was number 1, talking about practical difficulty. So you could talk, based on your deliberation, you could stretch it to indicate that this unreasonably prevents the owner from utilizing their historical property.
Everybody understand that one?
I think so.
Okay. Well, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
I'll try.
You're right. Just state the case number. Yeah.
In the case of 2021-005, I move to approve the requested 1-foot yard fence height variance located at 508 East Sherman Street based on the following findings of fact. It complies with Standard 1, based on the subject property has practical difficulties where it would be unreasonable to prevent the use of the property, particularly considering the historic nature of the property. It complies with Standard 2, based on the proposed variance will result in substantial justice to be done on the property. It complies with Standard 3, based on the proposed variance will maintain public safety and welfare. It complies with Standard 4, based on the subject property has extraordinary circumstances insofar as it is a historic property. It complies with Standard 5, based on the proposed variance would not result in a safety hazard or nuisance. it complies with Standard 6. Based on the proposed variance would maintain a harmonious relationship with the adjacent land uses.
I will second that motion.
We have a motion and a second on the floor to accept this.
We're gonna go with roll call.
Yep.
Delaney,
Yes.
Hutchins,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Murphy,
Yes.
Machota,
Yes.
McGaw,
Yes.
Rebar.
Yes.
The fence lives. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda is board member comments. Larry?
No comment.
No comments.
No comments except
Nope.
thanks for showing up. Anybody else for any comments?
I got nothing.
Ms. Petrola? You have any board comments? Okay. We adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much, folks, for showing up.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchins.
I am.
Fantastic
Thank
job
you.
on your home. It's beautiful.
Your
So beautiful.
enthusiasm and
When you're all done with the inside, I want to.
Oh yeah, yeah. You know.